Well, it's now my pleasure to introduce today's keynote speaker, Bill Crim. Bill serves as the Senior Vice President for Collective Impact and Public Policy for United Way of Salt Lake, where he has worked since 2004. He has worked for more than 22 years on issues related to economic opportunity, healthcare, education, and poverty, first as a research fellow for the Coalition on Human Needs in Washington, D.C., and then as a researcher, policy analyst, community organizer, lobbyist, and executive director for Utah Issues. And you'll note when he comes here, he and I share the same hairstylist. So with that, please join me in welcoming Bill Crim.
Thank you, Gordon. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. And, when Marcy called me to ask if I would do this, I felt this immediate bond. And we get calls from other communities, but I don't feel the same way about every community. And I'm not trying to kiss up so that you appreciate my remarks. But I felt like we had something in common. One of my greatest pleasures in life, which sometimes Utah's environment doesn't support, is my love of good beer. And you produce some of the best beer in the world. I hope you know that. I drink too much, as you can tell. My hairstyle is similar to Gordon's, but he's much more fit than I am. But as you should know, I'm helping your economy because I buy your beer in Utah all the time. I think we also share something else. I think we share a concern for our community. And that's one of the best things about a United Way, is that it brings people together around this common concern. And too often in communities, kids don't have the opportunities to succeed. And I'm sure maybe the data is a little bit different here, but in Salt Lake, we have pockets of poverty or neighborhoods where if you're unlucky enough to be born there, 2/3 of you will not end up ready for kindergarten, or your kids wouldn't end up ready for kindergarten. Those same neighborhoods often will just be places where you never catch up. Half of kids not reading on grade level, 2/3 not being proficient in math, half, sometimes more in some communities, not graduating from high school. Almost none of these kids in these communities go to college, and that is bad for them, it's bad for their families, and it's bad for the rest of the community. It's bad for our economy. It's a huge problem. So we all get busy. We get together and we start to work on this, and unfortunately, sometimes the good work that we do doesn't translate into community-level results. That same neighborhood, 10 years later, offers the same odds to the kids that are born later. Some people call this a results paradox, and I was talking to Gordon before. It's experience, and it's his experience. I've never read a grant proposal, and to be honest, I've never submitted a grant proposal until recently, where the community problems that we describe are not getting worse. When people ask us to talk about the needs, we look at community level data and we tell ourselves, because it's factual, that community problems are getting worse, but we've got a program to solve it. So I've also never read a grant proposal where the described program to address those community problems doesn't solve the problem and make them better. That is the paradox. And we started to notice this as an organization more than 10 years ago and started to wonder, what's going on? How is it possible that we can do so much, that these programs can be so good, and that at the end of the day, community problems are getting worse, not better? In many of the communities where we work as a measure of poverty, free and reduced price school lunch doesn't change. Health status gets worse. academic achievement in language arts and in math is going the wrong way. And this is despite the fact that we put more and more and more resources into these communities. This is a representation of a neighborhood where there just are an enormous number of programs and services. Yet in that same neighborhood, a third of the population lives in poor health, 50% live in poverty, and a third have no high school degree. In 2009, some smart people, way smarter than me, wrote an article published in the Stanford Social Innovation Review that said, despite spending vast amounts of money and helping to create the world's largest nonprofit sector, we have fallen far short of solving America's most pressing problems. We have to ask ourselves, why is that? How can we do so much good? And it really matters. The lives that are changed by the programs that we operate and invest in do an enormous amount of good. But how is it possible that we have not solved these problems? Well, one answer might be that there are three kind of big common myths out there. One is that in order to solve big, complex social problems, you have to have a sort of unique, unusual, and rare leader. And this is a myth because Rosa Parks did not work alone. She worked together. She was the epitome of collaboration. She and all the people that we don't know about were. We forget that sometimes. Sometimes we think, well, maybe we just don't know what the answer is. There's got to be a silver bullet solution, a program with magical capabilities, the ability to make everything better. And we try that and we look for it, and that doesn't seem to work. And when that doesn't work, we try what in Salt Lake sometimes we call spray and pray. Let's try to do everything and hope that that works. And that seems not to work very well either. So it might be not that the solutions that we're looking at are mythical. It might be that we don't understand the problems. The same people that wrote the article about catalytic philanthropy and wrote and researched about collective impact say that there are three types of problems in the world. There are simple problems, and simple problems have pretty simple solutions. Pretty much anybody, maybe except for my teenage son, can bake a cake. And if you have the instructions, you can make it work. Complicated problems are kind of the same, but you have to be smarter. So if you have the right technical expertise and you have the right technical manual, there are instructions to send a rocket to the moon and bring it back. But what kind of problem is educating children who come from backgrounds of poverty and poor health, who lack opportunities and resources, whose families struggle with multiple jobs or with unemployment? The variables at play in trying to address poverty are so complex. They require a different kind of solution. And what the researchers that our solutions don't match the complexity of the problem. Funders tend to fund individual programs and grantees. Those of us that work in nonprofits, while we collaborate all of the time, we typically do so in a way where we still have to compete for resources. When we try to evaluate things, we're looking for that particular magic bullet solution. We think that we're going to find that magic solution, we're going to take it to scale, and problems are going to go away, and it doesn't seem to work. They call this isolated impact. The alternative, they said, is something else. Large-scale social change requires broad cross-sector coalition or cross-sector coordination. Yet again, too often we think just one sector can solve these problems. Think about how unrealistic it is to expect that a teacher in a school filled with low-income students is going to solve that problem by his or herself. Think about how unrealistic it is to think that one or many nonprofit organizations can solve poverty by itself. Without coordinated, aligned action of the public sector, the nonprofit sector, the private sector, We might not be able to solve these problems, but what if we could align those sectors in a new way? The researchers came up with this idea that collaboration, we collaborate all the time, but collaboration is not enough by itself. We need a type of collaboration that, in comparison to Little League Baseball, might be the Colorado Rockies. We need something different. And the first thing is we've got to get focused on a common agenda, a shared goal. Now that sounds easy. Lots of people say to me, well, Bill, we all care about kids. That's the shared goal. That's not specific enough. We have to care about these particular kids or this particular community. And we have to care about everybody, or we're only going to get programmatic results. We're going to help a few kids, but not everybody. We won't change a community unless our common agenda means everybody. Then we have to do something that starts to make people a little bit uncomfortable. We have to share data and accountability. Not to evaluate after the fact. We have to share data to target what we're doing up front, to decide who is it we're trying to help, what do they need, and we have to be smart about it. We have to use data in entirely new ways. Then we have to work a little bit differently together. It's not enough to co-locate services. It's not enough to just come to some meetings together. We have to look for ways to mutually reinforce each other, to work differently together towards that shared goal. And those three things don't happen unless we make time for constant communication, unless we trust each other, unless we stop competing as much as we can and think about how we stay committed to a long-term collaborative effort with a very focused goal and using data to drive decision-making. Now, before this article, Collective Impact, was written, I think everybody, lots of people knew this. Of course, that all makes sense. That's pretty simple. That's not rocket science. Pretty basic. But those things don't grow in the wild. That is not natural. That is not how the world works. Those four elements of collective impact do not exist, and if they happen to come together randomly, they do not sustain themselves accidentally. In order to sustain that kind of collaboration, you have to have what the researchers call backbone support. It's like having a manager on a baseball team, or it's like having a quarterback on a football team. Somebody has to help bring people together. It's impossible to run an after-school program and build a community collaboration at the same time and sustain it for very long. But if you have those five things, you can take what looks like a bunch of isolated parts and you can turn them into a bicycle that will get you somewhere. That's the idea behind collective impact, the idea behind collaboration that's different than what we typically do. And if you have a collective impact effort, if you have that infrastructure in place, you can take a vision, and I won't ask you to raise your hands, but this vision is not anything unusual. For the last 22 years, I've worked in the nonprofit sector. Almost every nonprofit organization I've ever been part of or known has a lofty vision. It's what we all care about. It's what wakes us up in the morning. But when we write that vision down, typically, we all say, well, we can't do that by ourselves. We're going to be accountable for something else, for our piece of it. And it turns out that when we do that, no one's accountable for the big vision. But if we worked together, we could do that. We could make sure that entire communities of kids have different chances and different odds to succeed. One of the business leaders in our community became so enamored by this idea before we actually proved that it worked, that he said, we have to tell people about this. Let's not pilot it. This has to be everything we do.
One of the things that United Way has changed is its focus. It's not the United Way of previous years where we funded programs or agencies. It's now a new collaborative effort where we join with foundations and businesses and schools and city governments and other nonprofits to go in and provide so many services in neighborhoods that really make a difference. Services like early learning programs, job training, literacy, financial literacy, it's transformative. It changes neighborhoods, and it really is changing the odds.
So we picked 6 neighborhoods to try this out in, and we invited everybody together. This was not just a United Way thing. We got everyone together, and then everyone in the nonprofit world together, and then we said that's not enough. We need to get the private sector and the public sector together.
We have a group of students that come to our school that do not have the same resources and do not have the same background experiences that make our job easier. They show up at the school blank slate. A lot of them haven't held a book. To ensure success means you need a collaborative. You need a community that is willing to work together to meet the needs of those students. The United Way is being instrumental right now to create a united, organized relationship among all these organizations, and everybody really wants to help. Students who might need help with eyeglasses, the Seymour program, wonderful program. We're able to connect students and families to dentists. We're able to connect students and families to mental health supports, and that is hard work. Creating a seamless, systematic delivery system for parents is a real challenge, and that's the work we're in.
So what does it look like when you do that? Again, this isn't just United Way. It's every organization we can find in a community aligned around a common goal using data. One of the poorest communities in Utah, with one of the highest crime rates in Utah. Academic achievement in language arts went up by 20% for all 6th graders in every school. Science proficiency for every junior high schooler went up by 12% in that community. And they are on a trajectory to change that entire community. We experienced unanticipated results in that community as well. We didn't know this would happen.
Well, we've seen our youth, specifically our gang involved crime, it's dropped 76%, which is significant. And you're talking about, some petty things like graffiti, property crimes, the underage smoking and drinking. So that's very significant. A lot of that's, I think, owed to the number of community centers that we have in the city. United Way has been absolutely invaluable. They're helping us with that community outreach, and obviously the investment again in our kids. We really took a look at that at-risk time for youth, and that's typically from 3 to 6 p.m. We have a lot of single-parent families in South Salt Lake, a lot of latchkey kids that go home and without supervision. So by having these after-school networks, the community centers, the PAL Boxing Center, which is our police athletic league, it's given kids an opportunity to go somewhere, get help with their schoolwork, to socialize in a positive environment, and to interact with positive role models and mentors.
This is every junior high school in our state's 3rd largest school district. The 2 schools that are circled are junior high school students with more poverty than all but one junior high school, and they outperform academically virtually every other elementary school, certainly ones with far less poverty. Now, to wrap up, I just want to say this isn't just about graphs and charts and numbers. This is about kids, and those kids are our future, and that's what we ought to have in mind as we think about how to sustain this kind of collaboration.
I go to Granite Park Junior High, and my favorite subject is lunch and art. I like to go to the PAL Boxing Center. I've been doing it for about a year already. They help me do better in school, because they help me with my homework. From 3 to 4, we just work on our homework, and then at around 4. You could go to boxing, or you could do a different program. When I grow up, I want to be maybe a boxer or a doctor. In order to be a doctor, I have to stay in school for a really long time, and I'm gonna do it.
That's Uriel. Uriel needs us to work differently together. He doesn't need us to do different things. He needs us to do what we do well, but he needs us to work together. And it's not okay for him and for kids like him to not do that. And as business leaders and philanthropists and nonprofit leaders, it's not sustainable to not work together. We can change Uriel's future and the future of every kid like him if we work together. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today and to be in your community. Good luck with all you're doing. Thank you very much.